Welcome to Eye on America. I'm Michelle Miller. Today we honor our nation's heroes and the communities across America making a difference. We'll go inside innovative companies transforming fashion from the lab to the runway. And we have a backstage pass to the historic Lincoln Theater in Washington, D.C. But we begin with an important story about the mental health challenges many veterans face after serving our country. Catherine Herridge introduces us to a possible solution offering veterans help with anonymous counseling.
Bill Mulder was one of the nation's most decorated Navy SEALs.
He was a true patriot, 20 years serving his country.
His wife, Sydney, says he was a great dad and dedicated to his SEAL team.
Bill was incredibly proud. He loved his job.
But after a grueling mission to Afghanistan in 2009, Sydney says Bill changed. He was angry, started drinking excessively, and shut down.
Why did Bill refuse the help?
He felt if he opened up and if he were honest and truthful, he would jeopardize his career. And I'll get kicked out. I'll lose my security clearance. 6
months after leaving the Navy, he called Sydney on FaceTime and put a gun to his head.
And I said, "You're scaring me. I'm scared." And I heard a gunshot and I saw what I saw, and then the phone, it went black, and I threw the phone on the ground.
Say I'm a veteran or service member seeking help.
At the same time, Sydney's brother, William Negley, a former CIA officer, was developing Sound Off, an app that would let those who serve reach out for help anonymously.
And then you're using encryption to protect the actual conversation.
Exactly.
According to the VA, 17 veterans a day take their lives.
Half or more of those that are suffering the most never seek help.
John is one of the veterans who downloaded the app. His team cleared roadside bombs in Afghanistan.
I do think the Sound Off app saved my life.
We agreed to protect his identity. Sound Off put him in touch with a therapist.
If a soldier or a service member wishes to advance their career and stay in the service, to seek mental help, I think is a barrier still.
Negley says the app has helped 200 veterans, and he wants to expand. 4 years later, Sydney Mulder wears the watch her husband had on when he died. Clipped on is their wedding ring.
I'll put my finger and just kind of sit there.
A reminder, she says, their family is healing, and Bill continues to serve.
Let's continue the conversation about healing the wounds of war. For some female veterans, the journey begins at sea. Lilia Luciano has the story.
Ready to go. Sergeant Mia Peterson knows what it's like to be among a small group of women in a military dominated by men. So when women were invited to War Heroes on Water tournament, a 3-day deep-sea fishing trip for veterans wounded in combat, the Iraq War vet felt right at home.
It's team building, so it also goes back to some of the military experience that I've had as well.
Peterson received a Purple Heart after being injured in 2005, but says returning home was sometimes the hardest part.
It wasn't really known some of the aspects of returning from a war and what that would look like. So I was angry a lot, I was frustrated, I thought there was something wrong with me.
Retired Staff Sergeant Vanessa Brown was wounded by a roadside bomb in Afghanistan.
A lot of people that I met in the civilian world just wouldn't understand some of the things that I went through. They automatically had the stigma that if you have problems with mental health, you're just automatically crazy.
That's why these women say it's important to connect with fellow vets at events like this one, 101, where the women caught some of the biggest fish.
It's like I could accomplish something again. It was like I had a mission to do, and here's a finish line.
And a much-needed lifeline.
After the break, we'll meet some stylish scientists developing earth-friendly additions to your wardrobe. Welcome back. Leather is a clothing and footwear staple for many, but its production can have a significant carbon footprint. Jamie Wax met up with some award-winning scientists developing animal-free and sustainable alternatives to what we wear.
4 years ago on a quiet street in San Francisco, Allbirds co-founders Tim Brown and Joey Zwillinger opened this store, hoping to disrupt the fashion industry in style, and just as importantly, in substance.
I believe it's a zero carbon emission wool.
From wool produced through regenerative farming practices in New Zealand, to harnessing eucalyptus tree fibers for its sneakers, Allbirds has been redefining fashion forward.
What are some of the challenges using new materials?
The whole industry has had a focus on plastics and synthetics now for going on 50 years. And all of a sudden you're trying to bring a new material, a new supply chain into a new product. And we've been around 5 years.
Leather is one of the most common materials in shoes. Zwillinger understands why.
It breathes. It's like, naturally weather resistant. It bends nice when you walk and it feels good. And that's a very high bar.
But leather is made from cattle hides, with animal agriculture responsible for roughly 20% of all greenhouse gases. And both traditional and vegan leather alternatives are manufactured using petrochemicals, adding another layer of toxicity.
And you look out into the world of alternatives to bovine leather, and there's not a lot out there.
As a certified B Corporation fully committed to climate-friendly business practices, Allbirds has had to walk the walk on sustainability, leaving any kind of existing leather off the table, until now.
So how excited are you to put this into wide use?
I mean, super excited.
When we met in November, the pair gave us a sneak peek of the all-plant-based leather alternative being used on an exciting new sneaker line. Now, 10 months later, Allbirds has launched its Pacers, available in the alternative leather called Mirum.
We scoured the earth for the best alternatives that we could find from this, and we uncovered a group that was innovating in our backyard.
The brand synonymous with Silicon Valley found what they were looking for in Peoria, Illinois.
If you can mold and shape nutrients to make performance materials, then the whole world's different.
Where 7 years ago, Luke Haverhals founded Natural Fiber Welding, or NFW.
If the molecule's relatively small and not so complex,
Haverhals, a PhD in chemistry, was researching at the U.S. Naval Academy until an epiphany brought him home to the Midwest.
The most complex, high-performance materials people know about are not the synthetic ones. They're natural. And yet we make so many things out of synthetics. So why? You can mold and shape polyethylene, polyurethane, polystyrene, polyester effectively into things that work for you in your everyday life. No one had invented the suite of technologies so that it would work with the abundant, redundant, diverse natural nutrients.
In other words, plants. Nature, Haverhals says, is actually 1,000 times more productive than chemicals.
All right, this material, think of this as a dough.
NFW uses the byproducts of nature's bounty, materials like cork and natural rubber. Yes, there is all-natural rubber from trees.
What a lot of people will do is they'll look at this waste and they'll say, how could I mix this with plastic to get something? And natural fiber welding comes along and says, let's not use the plastic part. Let's figure out how to mix these things together.
The leather industry, no one has any of this stuff.
In the case of plant leather, he's got Aaron Amstutz to thank.
And I just love inventing.
NFW's Chief Technology Officer, who created Mirum 4 years ago, he took us inside the factory where natural materials are fed into an industrial mixer, sheeted out, and then cured under heat and pressure.
How difficult is the aspect of color with this?
So surprisingly tough, because the color isn't a thin coating over the top. The color is integral to the recipe. If I put cork powder in, the natural color will be brown. If I put lots of rice hulls in, the natural color would be tan. This happens to be clays and talcs. They give it that off-white hue.
Along with sneakers, NFW is working with a host of brands, including BMW, which hopes one day to use Mirum for car interiors, including seats. To make sure the material is viable, it runs tests for features ranging from durability to exposure to climate.
Ralph Lauren released this hoodie, and fabrics like this are produced on machines like you see here.
In addition to plant leather, NFW has developed a textile line it calls Claris, which fuses natural fibers to mimic a moisture-wicking synthetic.
Now the fiber is in that format that the plastics normally can take on and be in.
But it feels like cotton.
But it doesn't just feel like cotton, it is cotton.
You may say he's a dreamer, but he's not the only one.
There have been a number of leather alternatives coming to the market in the last few years.
Rachel Cernansky covers sustainability and fashion for Vogue Business.
There's Milo from Bolt Threads. There's the Ecovative material.
Water repellent and biodegradable.
There is MycoWorks, which is partnering with Hermes. So the optimistic view is that they are doing these small tests to see what works in anticipation of scaling them up.
It's amazing that all of this is plant-based, all of this.
So here's a foam that's no petrochemicals, no plastics.
Haverhals hopes to make a fully biodegradable sneaker.
So when you have foam and you have a sole, you can make a nutrient shoe. That's a thing that's coming out a little later this year.
One you can run through a shredder and safely sprinkle right back into the earth.
Because the moment that any brand, let alone some of the big brands, start making nutrient things, then it's kind of like you can't not make a nutrient thing, right?
That's been Allbirds' goal from its founding. And with Mirum and other natural materials on the horizon, they think the sky's the limit.
People still, for the most part, they want better products. That's our goal. The way we unlock all that value is through sustainable innovation. The opportunity ahead of us, it's like almost infinite.
Switching gears now, and that pun is intended, to an all-American vehicle capable of an all-electric facelift. Chris Van Cleve takes a ride in a classic Ford pickup truck that's more than meets the eye.
This is not your grandpa's 1978 Ford pickup.
Try that accelerator. Whoa! Yeah.
This F-100 is completely electric.
The motors are much smaller than the engine, so they're slung really low in the vehicle.
A 44-year-old classic now powered by a brand new electric motor.
You're basically taking out all the innards and putting in something new.
Right.
Taking it from about 150 horsepower to almost 500, allowing car buffs to go back to the future.
It basically makes everything about the vehicle better.
Darren Palmer is charged with electrifying Ford.
I imagine a traditionalist would look at this and go, but you're ruining a classic.
I would love them to try it.
And there are plenty who want to try it. Installing Ford's conversion kit called the Illuminator currently requires an experienced mechanic.
This is a Ford Illuminator E-Crate motor,
which is keeping Kirk Miller in Los Angeles very busy. His company, AEM EV, builds the electronics and hardware to turn a gas-powered car electric.
There's a massive shortage of conversion shops. The longer-term goal is to get it to where it's plug and play. I'm going to say, a year or so out minimum.
The Ford engine kit quickly sold out, but the market for electric conversions is just getting charged up. It's expected to surge to nearly $120 billion by 2031.
It goes.
As for driving this workhorse turned electric hot rod, it's smooth, it's fast, and it's quiet, which might just be the sound of the future.
Coming up, a centennial celebration of a theater that's been a host to history. This is Eye on America. We close our show with a story about a special venue that opened during the era of segregation but became a cultural epicenter for African American audiences to gather for arts and entertainment. Let's go backstage at Washington, D.C.'s Lincoln Theater to see how it's undergone a transformation without losing its place in history. The Lincoln Theater stage seems custom-made for British songstress Yola and her genre-fluid style.
I love the narrative of places like this that just give so much life to music.
It's a nod to the storied history of the theater and its U Street home, the cultural epicenter of a thriving African American community.
Here we have Black Broadway, another hotbed of Black culture, of development of jazz music, of development of all the things that surround or influenced and touched by jazz music, happening right here. And so, like, it's really significant to be here.
The Lincoln Theater opened in January of 1922 and offered audiences refuge from the indignities of a segregated era. This is an incredible space.
Thank you. We really try to retain as much of the historical element as possible.
Charisse Rhines runs the new Lincoln Theater.
I think it's very majestic.
And boasts about its original heyday any chance she gets.
We kind of predated the Renaissance that people refer to in Harlem. And there was a huge music scene in DC. People such as Pearl Bailey, Cab Calloway, Duke Ellington performed here and set the standard for what live music was like in this area.
Below the theater, a dance hall called the Lincoln Colonnade hosted social events for all.
FDR used to have birthday parties here.
As in Franklin Delano Roosevelt, our 32nd president. He liked this space.
He did like this space, and there were people from different backgrounds that would attend those parties. So people felt like segregation was taking a holiday at those events.
Outside the jewel of U Street, all that culture fostered a neighborhood of Black-run and Black-owned businesses, some that remain today.
You have Ben's who've been neighbors to the theater for what?
Yes, since
70
the 50s?
years? Yeah.
So the Lincoln Theater was very important to the community and certainly very important to Ben and me.
Virginia Ali and her husband Ben opened Ben's Chili Bowl in 1958, right next door to the Lincoln Theater.
Sometimes you could go over there and smell chili dogs because they would have snuck a chili dog in the Lincoln Theater, yes. But it's been a wonderful asset to this community for all these 100 years.
But the history of this area also includes decline. Riots in 1968 stirred by the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., construction for the D.C. Metro in the late 1970s, and rising competition elsewhere all forced the closure of the Lincoln in 1983. Until the city fought for its preservation. It reopened in February 1994 after being named to the National Register for Historic Places. And again in 2013 under a new operator, box office giant IMP.
What's your favorite spot in the theater?
You know, I really like this fireplace area.
Upgrades were made to the 1,250-seat venue, including a state-of-the-art sound system and a multi-million-dollar renovation.
We really tried to keep it as regal as it was in the 20s.
It's already booked 1,000 shows here, attracting more than 600,000 patrons.
We have had rock concerts, we've had country music concerts, we've had a Mexican ballet, we've had a go-go showcase. We have church every Sunday.
Really?
And we've had drag shows. I take pride in the fact that this is a venue where you can look at the calendar and almost anybody from any background with any interest can find something on the calendar that would interest them.
With plenty more, they say, to come.
We have such a diverse offering of performances and of genres and
audiences too.
And of audiences as well, which to me is a reflection of the legacy of what the theater was built for.
For more stories like these and live coverage of breaking news 24/7, Stream us right here on CBS News. I'm Michelle Miller. Thank you for watching Eye on America.
This episode of Eye on America is sponsored by Amazon.